Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's online event featuring a very great speaker who will be discussing on this International Day for Persons with Disabilities. What is normal? What is disability? Before we begin today's event, we would like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 is hosted at CHIO, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them in this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We also honor all Inuit, First Nations, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. As well, we've turned on the auto transcribe functionality today, so we do apologize up front if the auto transcribing is not as accurate at times. My name is Andrew Tomeyer. I go by the pronouns he, him, and I'm the Education Coordinator with N4. I will be hosting and moderating today's webinar. My co-host is Mariah Maddock, who will be monitoring the Q&A box today. I'm pleased to introduce you to today's presenter, Dr. Monique Lanoix. Monique Lanoix is Associate Professor in the Faculty of Philosophy at St. Paul University. Her research interests focus on feminist analyses of care. She's published on care work in Hypatia and the International Journal of Feminist Approaches to Bioethics. She co-edited a book titled Aging in an Aging Society, Critical Reflections with Iva Apostolova. She is also published in Healthcare Analysis and Medicine, Healthcare, and Philosophy. She is currently a principal investigator on 2 projects that examine paid caregiving. And to also mention, she's one of the many excellent professors of the N4 St. Paul University online program in newcomer navigation. And for those interested in the program, we are seeking out anyone that may be interested in attending our 4th cohort of students next year. So after this presentation, if you would like more information on that, please send me an email and we can discuss on that matter further. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Lanoix.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our N4 platform. We'll be sharing this with you as soon as it becomes available. Should there be any technical issues during this webinar, we will inform you with details for an alternate makeup session. As well, before we begin today's event, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to our platform features to help enhance your participation experience. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write your questions in the Q&A window. We know that sometimes many of you might have the same question or be interested in a particular response. Today you have the option of upvoting a question. Please upvote questions you're interested in hearing the answer to, and we'll prioritize which questions we pose to the speaker first. Our speaker today has no conflicts of interest to declare. So with that said, let's jump right over to today's webinar, and I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Lanoix. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we will start sharing and all right. So this is my great pleasure to be here on the actual day, which is the International Day of Disabled Person, which was put forward by the UN in 1992. And it's really to highlight the importance of thinking beyond a certain view of normality, right? Of how most people function or walk around or how they communicate, but really to highlight how we're diverse community of human beings, and also to really increase the awareness of individuals who may function differently, but still have something. They do have something to contribute to society, culturally, politically, socially, as family members, and so on. So I think it is a really, really important day. Many of us probably have either a relative or we know someone who has a disability. So 1 in 7 individual has a disability, and that's worldwide. So chances are you know somebody with a disability. A lot of children are disabled, 100 million worldwide. And this is important because children are our future and they need access to proper nourishment, healthcare, and education. The unfortunate statistic statistics actually is that children with disabilities will encounter more violence, and the UN statistics say 4 times more. This is also the case for women with disabilities. 80% of people with disabilities live in developing worlds, or developing countries, that is, and that means that they need perhaps more support. A lot of collaboration would be needed. 50% do not have access to healthcare, and this is especially the case in countries where healthcare is tied to employment, and persons with disabilities often have a hard time finding a job. So the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and Canada is a signatory of this convention, was adopted in 2006, and it was signed in 2007. And this is important because it is an instrument for human rights. So it's not only acknowledging that individuals with disabilities are part of our world, but it's also acknowledging that justice, rights for persons with disabilities is as important as rights and justice for other groups. So what does the convention do very generally? Well, it protects the rights to equality and non-discrimination. And if you've seen job ads, for example, they will say, you know, if you need special accommodation, contact us, we will, you know. Also, different countries have different ways of handling rights. So we have a Charter of Rights and Liberties here in Canada. So the rights of persons with disabilities are enshrined in there. It also, the convention also is meant to help out. So we'll explain kind of the types of actions that countries should take to ensure, maybe examples of policies and so on. So it's really a way for people to share information and support each other. And the countries engaged in the convention are there to ensure, right? So it brings that to their minds, of course, to ensure there's non-discrimination in a variety of places, freedom of expression, opinion, and so on. So the convention is important as it is an instrument to highlight the importance of justice for all groups, and also to help societies become more accessible. Now, you may have noticed that I've used different terms. We often refer to a person with disabilities. That's perhaps the way you've encountered the terminology. A disabled person is also an expression that's used, and both are acceptable. The third one, crip, comes from crippled, and it is a word reclaimed in North America, especially by disabled activists and theorists. And I'll tell you more about that later, actually. So the terminology of person with a disability, the emphasis here is on person, right? I'm a person first. I happen to have a disability, but person is central. The other one, disabled person, is sometimes used as a political expression. The emphasis is that the person is disabled by the environment. Disablement exists as a consequence of the environment in which we live, or the way persons with disabilities are marginalized. A good friend of mine and colleague who passed away, who was a member of Dawn, which is the Disabled Women's Network. It's a Canadian network. She would say, I am a woman with disabilities, but more often than not, I am a disabled woman. And the picture here is that of an individual in a wheelchair in front of the stairs. So that person is disabled, not because she's in a wheelchair, but because there's no ramp for her to go up. So that's really a significant way to think of disability. A change actually that's happened over, I'd say, the latter part of the 20th century. CRIP is a more controversial term. I do not use it myself, but I do refer to when it's in a title or if a disabled activist or theorist calls themselves a CRIP theorist, for example. It's a term that's reappropriated by those who are disabled, basically. And you can hear the expression CRIP culture, which is a safe place for persons with disabilities to create and to put forward their ideas, which can be quite novel and controversial in terms of really forward thinking. So CRIP is it's not everybody that agrees with that term, but many do. This here is the cover of a book by Alison Kafer. She's a woman with disabilities. She's a philosopher. And her book, Feminist Queer CRIP, talks about the intersection of race, sexuality, and ability disability. It's a really good book, actually. It was published in 2013. So that's an example. She's very active, actually. She still writes. She's actually at the prime of her career. Now, this is an interesting documentary. So you have the picture here, and it says CRIP Camp. And it's a summer camp that happened in the 70s, where a group of teens with disabilities went to this camp to just have fun, basically, and to be like other teenagers. The documentary was nominated for an Oscar last year in 2020. It didn't win, but it's very, very good. And you'll see here the kernel of thinking by these teenagers of their rights, but also their pleasure at being with each other and being able to do, you know, the things that teenagers do. So Andrew will show you the trailer, actually. It's very short.
What, you want me to tell them what happened? Well, two people got cramps and they're spreading. We were all very hyper about it. And I have to go shower some people. I'll see you later.
I wanted to be part of the world, but I didn't see anyone like me in it. I hear about a summer camp for the handicapped run by hippies. Somebody said you probably will smoke dope with the counselors, and I'm like, sign me up.
Come to Camp Jeanette and find yourself.
There I was in Woodstock.
You wouldn't be picked to be on a team back home, but at Jeanette, you had to go up to bat.
Even when we were that young, we helped empower each other. It was allowing us to recognize that the status quo is not what it needed to be.
The world always wants us dead. We live with that reality.
At the time, so many kids just like me were being sent to institutions. It was just a continual struggle.
Most disabled people, like myself, are unable to use public transportation.
We needed a civil rights law of our own.
A rehabilitation program has been vetoed by the president because it was cost prohibitive.
We decided we were going to have a demonstration.
You get the call to action, to the barricades.
A small army of the handicapped have occupied this building for the past 11 days.
So many people from Camp Jeanette found their way into the building.
The FBI cut off the phones. The deaf people went, we know what to do. That's how we communicated to the people outside the building. The Black Panther Party would bring a hot meal. We were like this.
We are the strongest political force in this country.
We will no longer allow the government to oppress disabled individuals. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
What we saw at that camp was that our lives could be better.
If you don't demand what you believe in for yourself, you're not going to get it.
I said for
Would you like to see the handicapped people depicted as people?
Excuse me?
Oops, here we go. All right, thank you. There are a few notable, and my mic is on. There are a few notable sort of snippets of conversation in that. One is that I never saw anybody that looked like me represented in the social sphere. I want to have accessible buses, right? So before this revolution took place, if somebody who uses a wheelchair wanted to get around, they had to book a special bus 24 hours in advance. The bus may not have shown up on time and so on. So, or to book a special taxi that would cost a lot of money. So now in Ottawa, for example, and in many cities, we have accessible buses so that persons with disabilities can actually go from A to B with, simple bus fare. So that we see here that the kernel of what's thinking and sort of how the rest of society took what is supposed to be normal to be, that's the way it should be. And these teenagers were saying, no, actually, there's a better way. And they did forge the thinking to change policy. In 1990, in the US, the American with Disabilities Act was adopted. And that was a very strong piece of legislation, which basically said, hey, education should be accessible, public places, government buildings, transportation, and so on. So this was a really big change. Now, the interesting thing about that is that, you've heard, I'm sure, of the civil rights movement in the US in the 50s and 60s, and it was really the template, right, for social revolution, what to do, what actions to do. And then came also the women's movement, pretty much a lot of North America and Europe, and in other countries as well, right? Women's rights. But we don't hear about the rights for persons with disabilities, but it was there and it changed society in really meaningful ways. And so 2 years after the ADA, the UN recognizes this International Day to hopefully make the plight and the successes of persons with disabilities more visible. Now, what is disability, right? Should we define it? Is a definition useful, or is it more of a stigma? Of course, Crip Camp does show a lot of disability pride, but some people might say, well, I'm reluctant to join that club. So it's an interesting question, actually. And a lot of what activism by disabled persons have done is that we are proud to be who we are. We have good lives. We enjoy our lives. So that's kind of going against the usual grain of how we've portrayed disability. So defining disability is useful because it's a tool for recognition, right? And that recognition could also promote positive self-identity, to be part of a group. And it also gives access to funding, accommodation, and so on. So if you are in a workplace or in a school environment, it might be a bit painful to go through the forms and everything, but you can get accommodation. But it's not always easy. In fact, the deaf community, and these are individuals who are hearing impaired and sign, do not identify as disabled. They say, we're not sick, we're not disabled. We have a culture, which is our language. We communicate effectively with others. So they do not identify as disabled. So it's just to show you here that the definition of disability can actually, or just thinking about it, promotes discussion, not always agreement, but still, is a field of thought. And I always say to my students, when I encountered critical disability studies, it was like a whole field opening up for me. It was like, well, what is normal? Well, I always thought normal was this, but it's not. And you're looking at how certain bodies are portrayed in the literature or in film. It really is a field of thinking and social change, but also of, really criticizing, and a lot of the notions we've taken for granted. So I think it's to me, disability studies is really an important field of inquiry. All right, so how do we think about disability? And you may have heard the word handicap, and it's used certainly, although not as much anymore. So impairment, disability, handicap. This is how the UN has thought about it, and how the thinking has evolved. So impairment is the loss or abnormality of psychological, physiological, anatomical structure or function. So you are in a car accident, you have a spinal cord injury, your impairment is your spinal cord has been severed. Your disability is your lack of ability or your restriction resulting from, let's say, your spinal cord injury. So your legs do not move, which means that you do not walk. The handicap is the disadvantage resulting from the disability or the impairment. I can't get an education because my school doesn't have a ramp. That's kind of example. Now you will have noticed that in a lot of the documents that I've posted, handicap is not used actually. So it's kind of been dropped. Disability is what is used. This is not the case in French. In French, personne avec handicap or personne handicapée, that kind of takes place of disability, and incapacité would be impairment. In France, about 10 years ago, it was suggested that the term should be replaced instead of personne handicapée, personne en situation de handicap. So somebody in a situation of disability, kind of. But it didn't, it was not adopted. But still, it is a term used by some of us. When I write in French, I use it actually. Personne en situation de handicap is more or less the equivalent of disabled person. So the UN definition tells us that persons with disabilities are those that may have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments. So you could have, according to the UN definition, mental health issues that are disabling. Intellectual could have been born with an intellectual impairment if someone has Down syndrome, for example, or a physical, right? Which, you know, with various barriers, then sort of hinders that to that person's participation in society as with others. So we've seen certainly in the last decades a move away from institutionalizing individuals to, you know, having them be able to live in society through various arrangements, group homes, and so on. So that's more or less the definition, although it's not written in stone in the sense that it will vary, as I will sort of discuss. Disability, of course, the attention was on the dis, right? The link is dysfunctional. And ability is a normative term. So what is normal or typical? And if you know, look at this here in society, equal basis with others who are the implication functioning normally. But what does that mean? Or even typically? So normal here usually implies average. That's how walking is the way most people get around. But the word normal also has norm, which has an implication of it should be this way. So that's the worrisome part of it, is that it implies that if you don't function in the normal way, you are subhuman or sub-functioning. And that's a problem. And disability activists have said, I can function just like anybody else. It's just happen to need, let's say, a computer with a bigger screen and so on, right? So there is that sort of negative sort of connotation that creeps in. Susan Wendell has written about disability. She's a philosopher. She's retired now. She was at Simon Fraser in British Columbia, Vancouver. And she has chronic fatigue syndrome. So she thought about a lot of this, you know. And in her book, The Rejected Body, which is kind of old now, but it's still a very good book, actually. She notes that context has an impact on ability. So, for example, you are, and she gives her example, I'm in downtown, you know, in a condo in downtown Vancouver, and I need water, I just turn the tap on. I need to do my wash, I put it in the washing machine. But she says, if I was somewhere where I had to go get water from a pump, I couldn't do it. I would be disabled. So that's really interesting that the UN definition, and she criticizes it, doesn't really capture all that. But we have to keep that in mind. Context will, will determine what we can and can't do, depending on our way of being in the world. Another thing that she notes, which I found very groundbreaking, is that she says, pace can be disabling. Pace, how fast we go. And she puts forward, she said, the pace of the world today in Canada, for example, or North America, is such that it's been sort of thought of for a young man who is completely fit and has no children or is not doing any caregiving. So this sort of individual who is the setter of the pace is somebody who can run along the sidewalk, is not carrying a child or grocery bags, is in perfect shape, right? And can get from A to B really quickly and then do this, do that. And so for Susan Wendell, indeed, pace can be disabling. And we never talk about it. But, the world has been going more and more towards this idea of efficiency, more productivity and so on. And thinking in terms of critical disability should help us question that. And another sort of reflection that Wendell had, because she was sick, for example, is illness a disability? Is disability an illness? And it is a source of tension. Some illnesses are disabling. Think of Parkinson's disease, which is a neurodegenerative disease. Michael J. Fox was recently spoke about finding a cure for Parkinson's and so on. But he's been a figure of Parkinson's, and Parkinson's affects movement and so on. So some days he's very disabled. And some individuals who have disabilities are quite healthy. Somebody who has a spinal cord injury says, I'm fit. Well, look at the athletes in the disabled Olympics, for example, right? These are fit individuals. And then some people who are sick don't have disabilities. The other point too is that aging can be disabling. And in one of the links or further reading that I gave that Andrew will share is the Aging Disability Nexus, a book that reflects on where aging and disability meet, or the points of tension, the sort of fruitful thinking that it can bring about. Because we can age into disability, but we could also age with a disability. So these are all points of, sort of thinking and reflection that I'm pointing out. I don't have the answer to all those, but those are really interesting sort of aspects of our lives that need reflection. All that to say, though, that often disability in the past, and certainly still now, is viewed as a tragedy, right? And it is seen as possibly avoidable or should be avoided. And here on the right-hand side is genetic testing, or genetic programming, that one, but genetic testing. Should a woman terminate her pregnancy because the fetus has Down syndrome? And that's an area of controversy as well. Some disability advocates would say, no, disability should not be a reason for terminating a pregnancy. So that's on one side. The other side, on the left-hand side, you see a man there who there's sort of an example of the brain-computer interface. So a man, and there's a lot of research going on about how to help quadriplegics write, for example, by moving their eyes on the cursor and so on, and the movements. And so there's a lot of, so on one side, we kind of try to eliminate disability. The other side shows us how efforts are being made to help individuals integrate into society. So it's sort of two sides of the medal in a certain sense. Now we go beyond the biological and we think of the social, right? How are persons with disabilities represented? And that's a picture on the left-hand side of a film from the 50s, Wait Until Dark, where the heroine is Audrey Hepburn. She's blind, and there's a nasty guy who's trying to kill her because in her apartment there's a doll with drugs in it and so on. So she's both actually kind of the victim, but also a bit of a heroine. But we've seen in a lot of movies through the 20th century is the person with disabilities is some kind of monster, so marginalized individual, or a victim, right? So that's kind of problematic. On the right-hand side is Christopher Reeves, and some of you may or may not know, Christopher Reeves was Superman in some of the movies in the 90s, or no, it would have been in the 80s. So Hollywood actor. He fell off his horse, and that would have been in the 90s actually, and had a spinal cord injury, a very high up on the neck, like C2, C3 spinal cord injury, which meant that he was a quadriplegic. He was famous in that time post-injuries, passed away now, for advocating for a cure for spinal cord injury because he wanted to walk again, or perhaps not him, but others. And he was kind of criticized for that, right? Because then you kind of go, well, disability can be cured. And so then it's something we want to get rid of. So that was controversial amongst disability activists. At the same time, though, he advocated for support for persons with disabilities, because he had, being a Hollywood actor, rich friends, and so he had really good care 24/7, which he needed. So he went to Congress in the US and advocated for more care for persons with disabilities, but it's not as flashy as sort of promoting a cure for a spinal cord injury, but it is something that he did advocate for. And it's important that we think about individuals who need help. That's just one instance of us being dependent on each other. And no one, disabled or not, is able to function in life without other people. So we always have to remind ourselves that we are interdependent, and disability activists and theorists have put that forward, that we are not just dependent individuals. You are too. And of course, I depend on the fact there's heat in this building, the computer, somebody helped me do something, and so on, right? So you get the picture, I think. So we are now at thinking about models of disability. What does that mean? That's a way of framing disability. There are three models. And there has been a lot of progress in the last decades, and I'd say from the 60s on, so about 57, well, yeah, 60 years. And the progress has not just been in terms of better wheelchairs, access to buses, but theoretically as well. So until the 60s, 70s or so, we had the medical model of disability. Then that kind of changed as disabled activists and theorists got in the mix. And we sort of developed the social and the political model of disabilities. So what's the medical model? As the name implies, it means it's all biology, right? Person with a disability has an impairment. She can't walk. It's spinal cord injury. So she deviates from the accepted norm. That's her problem. You know, she's damaged goods or whatever. It's her problem. It's not society's problem. Disability is kind of like an illness that can't be cured. So it's up to the person to cope. You know, it's your problem. We've been kind enough to allow you to sort of be in our society and so on. In the worst case scenario, the person is put in an institution. And Crip Camp talked a little bit about that. Disabled theorists say, wait a minute, you know, disability is a construct. First of all, we assume it's deviation from a norm. But norm here is just what the majority has decided is normal. We could decide otherwise. We could say going from A to B includes walking, wheeling, skateboarding, and so on. So this kernel is sort of cogitating in many extremely smart people in the UK and the US, actually. Well, Canada too, but the UK was really a leading force in the social model of disability. Michael Oliver was one person who put forward that model. The social model then says, wait a minute, the problem of disability is not in the person herself. It's a problem of society. Society is not fully accessible. So it's not the disabled person's fault. It's not up to her alone to have to cope. And think again of the person in the wheelchair in front of the stairs, right? We have to think of these different social environments, right? Educational, work, living, and access. Educational environments to be accessible, to have different ways of presenting information. Work environments, again, accessible. Living environments, can you get your wheelchair in the elevator of this brand new condo building? And access to basics, access to healthcare. When you go to the hospital, is there accessibility? And I do have a good example about concerning that, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. The other thing that the social model sort of understands is that disability is not a fixed category. There's various forms of disability. And this, complicates everything. So somebody who's born with a cognitive impairment, for example, somebody who's hearing impaired, somebody who has trouble walking, and so on and so forth. So there's all these different modes of disability, which you can't put into just one single category. So we have to think in different ways. And the idea of universal design, for example, is that all kinds of people can access a room or a theater and so on. The other thing too is that disability varies for the same person from one day to the next. Michael J. Fox talked about that in terms of his Parkinson's disease, is that some days fine, other days his hands are out of control. So it's not a stable category. And Alison Kiefer that we saw earlier, and she really, I think, really singled out something important here, is that disability is experienced through relationships, right? The environment, other people. And she calls for a social relational model of disability. And think of it, persons who don't have disabilities, we are in relationships with each other. Now, what has happened in the last little while? So again, you have on the left-hand side, a movie from the 50s, The Best Days of Our Lives, which the man has an amputated arm, I think maybe two even. And so this is after the Second World War, where the Second World War really made thinking about disability, rehab, and also accommodation, physical accommodations. Really, wars are important for that. It's sort of perhaps one of the only good consequences of war, I don't know. Anyway, the Afghanistan and Iraq wars put actually emphasis on mental health, PTSD, and so on. On the left-hand side is France Geoffroy, and her group is Corpuscule Danse. She is the leader. She is the one in the wheelchair, and they are in Montreal. So that's how the social model kind of sees disability. Now, the political model is close to the social model, but it frames disability as a question of rights, right? And this is a poster. You gave us your dimes, now we want our rights. To move away from disability as a charity to disability as a question of rights. In Canada, our charter, again, there is, Canada puts forward that we indeed try to reduce barriers and increase opportunity to ensure for full participation in society and so on. And one case is interesting, that's in 1997, Elridge versus British Columbia. A woman who was hearing impaired showed up at the emergency ward and needed sign language interpretation. And this was not, it wasn't available. So the case was won because Canadians have the right to access healthcare. And so to end, with a quote from Martin Luther King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And disability is certainly a way to expand our thinking about social justice. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you, merci, Dr. Lanoix. This has been an excellent discussion, great presentation. So it was very informative, and this helped shine a light on this topic well, especially today on the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. So thank you for that. So let's move into the questions, and we've received a few. So the first question is sort of a bit of a combination between Safra's and Sahar's comment. She states that sadly one's race or religion could be a disability. And so when facing disabilities and being a newcomer as one with a different race or a different religion, do they face similar or different challenges when coming to Canada? And why?
Yeah, this is a good question. It's a question also of intersectionality, and I'm glad that was brought up. A white person who is disabled will not face the same barriers or access as African Canadian who is disabled, and so on and so forth. And so the basically how race, religion, gender, sexual orientation all intersect. They actually intersect also with disability, and that's really important to take into consideration. Now, whether one is disabled by one's religion is an interesting question, because I would say one is discriminated against because of one's religion, as opposed to one is disabled. But the end product of not being able to be who you are is kind of the same, right? So I would say that disability looks at discrimination based on the body and one's abilities. That is in a very physical and mental as well. But there is, I think, and I'm glad the question was asked, because again, the issue of intersectionality, and there are writers who've considered that. So one example is a man he was a young boy in North Carolina, I think it was, who was African-American, who was deaf and was labeled as cognitively impaired when he was not, and did not have access to education and so on, in the same way that had he been white, he probably would have. So yeah, I hope that kind of clarifies.
Oh yeah, thank you. And looking at the time, I think we've got enough time for maybe one, maybe two questions. This one relates more to Sahara's comment, where there are many professional dancers with disabilities, and we're seeing more and more representation with respect to more appropriately done movies, such as last year's, say, The Sound of Metal, Joaquin Phoenix in that Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot about John Callahan. Even our parliament, you're seeing representation more and more within the building, with our Senate, within our House of Commons, for example, and provincial and federal laws being more and more prominent as well. Where do you see we need more representation?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, the more persons with disabilities who can be in the public eye, the better, I believe. I think actually, it's sort of my own bias. I think that we really need to think about how we view assistance to perform certain tasks, for example, so caregivers, and how that has a very negative, it's viewed very negatively. So I would like more, I guess, forward thinking about getting rid of this stigma of dependency. And Stephen Fletcher, I believe, was a House of Commons MP from Manitoba in the Harper government, is a quadriplegic. And the man was a member of parliament, right? So, and, you know, he would say this sort of negative representation of being dependent, and look at what he accomplished, right? So I think that we really, as a society, we need to really try to get rid of that stigma of dependency.
Thank you. Thank you. And one final question we have is this one, Janet, who's asked, she's recently heard and been asked to use the term person with diverse abilities. Is this one which you have heard or one you think may get more traction in the future?
It's actually what I have encountered, and I meant to mention that, is the expression was used about 20, 30 years ago, differently abled. And disabled activists and theorists do not use that. They find it condescending. So the preference is a person with disabilities or disabled person, with the emphasis on the disablement by society.
And what do you think about the term challenged?
Yeah, I have a problem with that, actually, because then it reverts back to the person. I'm challenged. You know, it's like, well, actually, if I was using a wheelchair, I'm not challenged. You know, it's not, I'm not challenged at all, actually. And yeah, to me that it, again, the at least, you know, the persons with diverse abilities, at least that sort of recognizes the other, you know, the abilities of people. But challenge just means that I've got a problem, I'm challenged, you know, and yeah, it's, to me, I don't like it.
No, yeah, I agree. So with that, we've only got a few minutes left. So I very much want to thank you so much, Monique Lanoix. Before we go, is there any final words that you have to share or you have to say to the audience?
Well, the Newcomer Navigator program is great. Sign up for Ethics and Disability, and do think of disability in a positive way. I think it is such an interesting field, and often we may fear it, but we shouldn't. It's great.
Thank you. And I'll definitely check out that Netflix documentary as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to share my screen. So again, I want to thank you very much, Dr. Lanoix, for taking the time to participate in today's discussion, and many thanks to you, the audience, for joining and engaging with us today. You're very much welcome to join us again at any of our upcoming events as well, and we will be, for example, our March 1st to 3rd N4 virtual online conference, with more details to come in the coming days. So keep posted or keep in touch and be aware of that as well. And if you missed any part of today's presentation or would like to watch this session again, we'll be posting this recording to the N4 platform within the next week or so. And we want to continue the dialogue that we've had during this webinar. And so we will be moving all the questions that we did not get a chance to answer to the meeting place post on our, which is our N4's online moderated discussion forum. We've invited Dr. Lanoix to respond to your questions here. We've also curated several resources related to today's webinar topic from Dr. Lanoix, including the video you saw today, as well as a variety of our partners. You can find these in our resource toolkit, and we will be linking them when we share the on-demand version as well. So if you haven't yet, please sign up to newcomernavigation.ca for all our resources and learning opportunities. Following today's session, you'll be invited to complete a survey to share your feedback with N4. These surveys help us continuously improve and seek out new webinar content and opportunities that are responsive to topics that you're interested in. We kindly ask that you follow the link to complete this brief survey. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. This is our last webinar presentation for 2021, and we very much want to wish you a safe and happy holidays. And we hope that you can join us at a future N4 event in 2022. Thank you. Have a good day and take care.